Everybody, welcome to today's meeting of the Board of Supervisors. Can we have a roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair Madrone. Supervisor Arroyo? Here. Supervisor Wilson?
Presente.
Supervisor Madrone?
Here.
Supervisor Bohn?
Yep.
And Supervisor Bushnell. Good morning. Thank you.
And please join us for the salute to the flag. Okay, thank you. And we'll go to the CAO. Are there any modifications to the agenda?
Good morning, Chair. There are no modifications to the agenda today.
Well, there we go. Nice and straightforward. Okay, well, we're going to start with our consent calendar, and we do have one proclamation, unlike last week where we had, I think, 8. So I'm going to go ahead and read that proclamation into the record. And we have some folks here to receive it here today. So whereas small business owners and Main Street businesses have vigor and a passion for what they do, America's progress is driven by pioneers who think big, take risks, and work hard. And whereas from the storefront shops that anchor downtown areas to the tech startups that keep America on the cutting edge, small businesses are the backbone of our economy and the cornerstones of our nation's promise. Whereas when we support small business, jobs are created and local communities preserve their unique culture. And whereas because this county's 33 million small businesses, I'm sorry, this country's, I'm like 33 million in Humboldt, that's pretty good. Whereas because this country's 33 million small businesses create nearly 2 out of 3 jobs in our economy, 2 out of 3 jobs. We cannot resolve ourselves to create jobs and spur economic growth in America without discussing ways to support our entrepreneurs. And whereas the President of the United States has proclaimed National Small Business Week every year since 1963 to highlight the programs and services available to entrepreneurs throughout the U.S. Small Business Administration and other government agencies, and whereas Humboldt County, alongside the Arcata, Fortuna, Greater Eureka, McKinleyville, and Southern Humboldt Chambers of Commerce, supports and joins in this national effort to help America's small businesses do what they do best, grow their business, create jobs, and ensure our communities remain as vibrant today as they are today, as vibrant tomorrow as they are today. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors, in partnership with the Arcata, Fortuna, Greater Eureka, McKinleyville, and Southern Humboldt Chambers of Commerce, do hereby proclaim April 30th, May 6th, 2023 as National Small Business Week in the County of Humboldt, and encourage all citizens to continue their support of Small Business Week now and throughout the year. Congratulations.
Sure, yes.
Well, thank you so much to Chair Madrone and the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors for recognizing Small Business Week. My name is Jessie Miles, and I am the Executive Director at the McKinleyville Chamber of Commerce. And I'm here today in collaboration with multiple chambers of commerce throughout our area. And together we represent over 1,000 businesses and over 10,000 employees throughout Humboldt County, which is pretty significant, and we're very proud to do that. Small businesses throughout Humboldt are truly the heart of Humboldt. It's why we all enjoy living here, working here, and enjoying the outdoors, playing, etc. So just a reminder to everyone to always remember to think Humboldt first, choose Humboldt, shop small, and today and always. So thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Annalisa Rush, and I'm the Interim Executive Director of the Arcata Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all so much for this proclamation today. We are so excited to celebrate Small Business Week. We've welcomed so many new businesses and witnessed such amazing collaboration and community during the pandemic, and witnessed loyalty in the community to our small businesses. So we just encourage everyone in the community to continue to support small business and always shop local, shop Arcata. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, both of you. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's always amazed me how small businesses account for really most of the jobs. Not all of them, but quite a bit of them. So, very important part of our economy. Yes, please, Supervisor
And then
Bohn.
I think shop local is, not necessarily small, but local, and provide for that, because I'm either a survivor or a victim or of small business. I was raised in a corner grocery store. Started working there when I was 8 years old, burning the trash, and then was lucky enough to buy my own bar and restaurant at 24 years old, right 2 blocks down the street. So about 45 years ago. So, yeah, small businesses do make the world go round, and I'd like to recognize, I know you guys have had your celebrations, and I know Fortuna is having their celebration, I believe, this Thursday night. And auction, so it's always a fun time. So support your chambers, support your local businesses.
Thank you, Supervisor Bohn. Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you for the proclamation. As a small business owner, I want to just say how important it is that people try to shop locally. And I know that with the economy right now, people are really shopping around price-wise. And oftentimes, if you ask that small business owner, hey, can you be comparable with the price? They're more than willing. And Southern Humboldt especially, we're losing about 1 brick and mortar a month right now down there. And it's never been so important as it is right now to recognize that we need to keep the smaller towns alive, and we can't do that without support from the local community to shop local. And I really appreciate the chambers being here, and that is a vital part of Humboldt County unincorporated and incorporated is the chambers. They really bring the brick and mortars together. So thank you for the proclamation.
Thank you, Supervisor Bushnell. Anybody else? Supervisor Wilson.
And with this, I just I don't know, maybe it's just a reminder of sorts that Humboldt County was the birth of what we call the Main Street movement, and specifically in Arcata, where a group of folks came together realizing that in the 80s, and late 80s, in the early 90s, that there was a desperate need for bringing attention back to downtowns, small downtowns in particular, especially in response to the mall movement that had occurred. And that movement is now national. And so like Beach Cleanup Day and other things that have started in Humboldt County, this is a very interesting and I think important piece of small business history that we should celebrate. Thanks.
Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you, and thank you so much for accepting this today and for your comments. I just also wanted to add that, we have a lot of makers in our community, a lot of people who have home-based businesses or make products, and it certainly springs to mind for me because my partner's small business, my husband's small business is an independent home-based business, and so I've really been appreciating a lot of the innovation that the small business community has been employing during COVID. A lot more outdoor fairs and markets where a lot of goods are brought together, goods and edible treats and all kinds of things. So I know the Fig Twig Market is one example of something coming up this weekend, but there's been a lot of innovation amongst brick and mortar businesses, but also amongst home-based businesses to really try to market what's unique and special about businesses in Humboldt. So I just also wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you, Supervisor Arroyo. And with that, we're going to go to public comment. We'll start with those that are in Zoom. And I do see one hand up there, and that is 7718, *6 to unmute, and you have 3 minutes to share your thoughts with us. Welcome.
Can you hear me from Mexico today?
We can hear you.
I'm in the mecca of small businesses. You wouldn't believe how many people go to their kitchen at home. They come by, they serve you 2 nice burritos for $5 total. Very few regulations down here that hamper someone from going out and doing whatever they can do to make a living. And that's why the United States has a major problem competing. That's why you will continue to see small businesses failing. That's why you will see that they are over-regulated right out of small businesses, because only the big businesses can afford to come up to the requirements. You know, you have to have an NSF kitchen, you have to have all this stuff. It's a little bit ridiculous, and that's my opinion. We have problems with small businesses, especially in a small little town like Blue Lake. We don't have the population base to support a lot of small businesses. A few people get by, you know, one person does hot dogs, and we have a few other things like that. But it's really hard work, and you have to really do a shout out to those people who are trying to do it. Places like Blue Lake, we really don't want to see our town gutted out and Starbucks come in rather than a little coffee shop. All these different places that some people want to turn this into a big city. Blue Lake would rather stay small with our little businesses. I have the Emporium, had it for years. I had it open as a small business. The people there could barely pay the light bill and a little bit of the insurance and taxes. So it's very difficult out there, especially after COVID. We're all competing with Amazon, and I do a shout out for all those people, especially maybe the county can do a little bit more to help the small businesses rather than just having something like this. They really need the help, and I think we need some grant writers, like some of you said, Supervisor Madrone, to help get some grants specifically for small businesses to keep them alive in what's going to be a very difficult time. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this topic.
Thank you, commenter. And I don't see any other hands up in Zoom, so we'll go to those here in the audience today. Anybody who would like to speak on our consent agenda, please come forward and let us know which item you're speaking on, and you've got 3 minutes. Welcome.
Can we speak on non-agenda items, or do we have to wait?
That'll be next.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for asking. Anybody on the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board.
I'll move consent.
So
Second.
we have a motion by Supervisor Wilson and a second by Supervisor Bushnell.
I have a comment.
Final questions? Yes, comment?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd like to thank the Elections Department for the work that they did with the Garberville and Salmon Creek annexation, and also the continued support from OES on the recovery from the storms and the earthquake.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead. Do we have our voting tabs today, or? Yep, has everybody got theirs up? Looks like they do.
Okay, motion carries 5-0.
Great, good way to start the day. All our technology is working for us today. Not always the case. Okay, and now we're going to go to public comment on non-agenda items, and again, I'll start with those in Zoom. And we have 2 hands up. We've got 7718, *6 to unmute. There you go, welcome.
I want to talk a little bit about process. We seem to be having there's a group of people in Blue Lake who wish to participate, and we're being portrayed as nothing but going after a person, and that's not what we're having problems with. We're having problems with lack of process and public participation. And there is one person who seems to not want that, and I won't even mention her name. But without the public participation, things don't go well. There's a very large project that's coming out, probably the largest project in Blue Lake history. It's supposed to be scheduled for Monday, May 15th, I believe. And we don't even know what the project is now. Most likely the information on that project will come out late Friday. We won't be able to get a hold of the city planner to get questions answered. And we really object to things being shoved through on this kind of basis. We can't participate if we can't see what things are and do our research on things. So when it comes to different things like that, I highly recommend when the county goes through the process, it enables people to understand and participate. In Blue Lake, it appears they don't want us participating. They don't want our input. A whole bunch of people gave input regarding this project, and I think it was probably maybe 50 people in the room. Of course, it was a city council meeting, no minutes on that meeting. But I think all but maybe 4 people or 5 people spoke against the project, and yet we were totally ignored. And now we come down to here, you're going to approve it and shove it through with no notification to speak of, no real ability for the public to understand the project. And this does not bode well. Transparency is king. It does not exist in Blue Lake in many fashions. And some of us say we're obstructionists. No, we just like a small town atmosphere. We like it to stay the way it is. And I guess people say you have to change. Maybe Blue Lake can be the exception to that. Maybe we can still have a nice small community that enjoys each other without having that outside influence and people taking on their agenda. Thank you for my opinion today.
Thank you, commenter. And next we have 0116, star 6 to unmute. There you go, welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, this is Ash Teeter with LostCoastPopulace.com. I wanted to do a little recap on some of the key events that led us where we are today. You might remember the Halloween all-age drag show at the Jefferson Center that led to the original resolutions on hate speech for the city of Eureka, the county level, and then at the county level, following the proclamation by the Human Rights Commission, all of which chastised citizens who were legitimately concerned with the illicit content of the performance in front of young children, all of which who did not even acknowledge such illicit content within the show, a practice that was mimicked by local media outlets such as Lost Coast Outpost, sensationalizing the narrative of hateful concerned parents and failing to mention that what they were concerned about. This continued over the next few months, spilling over to the small community of Ferndale with another all-age drag show that was protested by St. Mark's Church and their marquee signage. The reaction by local media was nearly identical to the reaction from the Jefferson Center show, sensationalizing the narrative of hate without ever even reaching out to really talk to Pastor Bramwell, something that the team at Lost Coast Populace actually did. Something around this, both Pastor Bramwell and St. Mark's, or sometime around this, both Pastor Bramwell of St. Mark's and Ken Rivera of Lost Coast Pride did an in-depth interview on the Growing Pains podcast with Nick Flores. In this interview, Ken Rivera of Lost Coast Pride acknowledged that there was, in fact, somewhat inappropriate behavior that stemmed from hasty planning of the Jefferson drag show, such as cash tipping and sexualized dancing in front of young children. After the blowback from the marquee St. Mark's the Ferndale drag show, it was moved to a later date, College of the Redwoods, a show that Ken Rivera described in his Nick Flores interview as being better planned and more appropriate for children, unlike the Jefferson Center show. Strangely enough, when we went to the College of Redwoods show to try to film, do a follow-up report on it,
30 seconds.
on the Jefferson story, we ran into being not allowed access to even film the show. Even if we purchased tickets, we were told. And we were also told that the First Amendment rights for people to protest were limited to the parking lot CR. So I'd ask all of you where it says in the Constitution that free speech shall be limited to the parking lot at the College of the Redwoods. And
Thank you, commenter. Apologize, time runs out quick, but thank you for your comments. And just to be clear, we do have an item on the agenda on the item on hate speech and such. This particular comment was much broader than that, so I let it go ahead. Next, we have 1041, star 6 to unmute. There you go. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. I was going to kind of, my name is Donnie Creekmore with Lost Coast Populist as well. I was going to kind of finish off where Ash just left off. So where everything got really peculiar for us as a local media organization and team of journalists was not only showing up and telling us that our First Amendment rights, if we were to be protesters or protesters were to show up, which from our collection of evidence none did, that they would have been segregated to the parking lot and not allowed to actually enter the area, which wasn't roped off or anything like that. It was just guards standing out front. Past that, something happened recently to where there's been a hateful and threatening comment that's been left on our website on a petition that we have called End Drag Events for Kids in Humboldt County. This has gotten about 70 signatures total so far since we posted it about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And, obviously there's trolls on the internet and we can't control this. And one got on there and they left a comment, and automatically whenever someone fills out a petition on our petition site or when they fill out a petition on say change.org, there's an option for the petition creator to have the petition email automatically to a board of supervisors, for instance, which is what ours does, like a decision-making body. That's the literal intent of this political instrument called the petition. And so that's what ours does. It automatically emails the board of supervisors each message and title. And so when that message came through with hateful and threatful comments, you know, instead of reaching out to us, the Board of Supervisors, Steve Madrone particularly, went into full resolution mode. You know, I guess he saw out of the ways to...
Donnie, excuse me. Donnie, you're really crossing over into the specific item on the agenda. So if you have broad comments, that's fine to finish up. But otherwise, if you're going to talk specifically about the item on the agenda, I would appreciate it if you would hold your remarks to that item on the agenda. So go ahead and finish up, please.
Yeah, I'm actually speaking about context prior to it. So I'm not actually speaking towards the agenda item itself. I have comments for that. I'm speaking of the context and everything that led up to it. And so we were not contacted by the Board of Supervisors regarding this hateful comment, which is what I'm speaking about, the hateful comment, not the resolution, the hateful comment. And instead, y'all went into full resolution mode.
Okay,
and,
thank you, Donnie. Appreciate it, but once you cross over and talk about the specific item, I think you're off topic. Thank you for your comments, appreciate it. And so that's all for comments on Zoom. And if anybody here today would like to come up and comment on non-agenda items, this is your opportunity. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Sonny Anderson, been in Petrolia since 1973, Humboldt County since 1970. I'm talking about my biggest fear in this county, and that's someday being burned out by Pacific Gas and Electric Company, who has a hold on our county, wants $300 million to upgrade their infrastructures in southern Humboldt to rely on these jackasses again to provide us power. The county needs to, and they may already be in progress of doing this, is to get away from Pacific Gas and Electric and at least go solar and wind on a smaller scale than what was on Bear River Ridge, and power our communities so we can at least shut the power down during the fire season. You know, it's so critical this happens all over California to where we don't rely on an incompetent power company that's created more than 25% of the fires in California in the past 7 years have been caused by PG&E. They killed 84 people in Paradise, got fined $3.2 million fine, which was the maximum fine that the judge could impose on a $177 billion company. Then we turn around and award these people with a safety certificate. Now, I'm not bad-mouthing the workers of PG&E that are out there every day risking their lives. I'm bad-mouthing the administration where 7 of them resigned after the Paradise fire with $1 million bonuses. And then a year later, after they awarded the safety certificate, there's a tree on a power line in Dixie, which created the Dixie fire and burned almost 1 million acres, the largest fire ever in California. It's absurd that these guys were awarded a safety certificate after that, which the only requirement of that safety certificate was they put sensors on the lines, which they did. The fire the year after started in Sonoma County. Thankfully, it only burnt 500 acres because of the weather. And what had happened, the PG&E had shut the sensors off because they were worried about all the false flag warnings they were getting. So they could have had linemen out there, and they should have linemen out there to inspect any power that goes off to determine whether it needs to stay off. It goes back on. PG&E has started over 4 fires in our area of Petrolia. Thankfully, the fire department got on them right away, but the weather conditions were cool, so thankfully we didn't have to worry about getting burned out by PG&E. But it's a major threat in the county to someday be possibly burned out by PG&E. I can accept lightning strikes and the natural causes of fires, but I can't accept anything that's created by PG&E. We need to partner with Tesla or somebody competent that can manage this power with microgrids, hopefully, and solar on rooftops for our people in the Humboldt County to get away from this danger of getting burned out by PG&E. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that has public comment on non-agenda items, please step forward. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Madam CAO, County Council. ladies and gentlemen of Humboldt County. My name is Vernon Price, and I'd like to bring to you, remind you that May is Mental Health Matter, or my apologies.
It's okay.
Mental Health Matters Month. The Hope Center is putting on, hosting multiple events. I believe I've given you flyers. Take Action for Mental Health Walk will be May 16th from 11:30 to 1:30. Sign making will be on Wednesday, May 3rd at the Hope Center from 11 to 1. On May 19th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., we're going to have a Wellness and Connection Barbecue from 11 to 2, and that will be at the Jefferson Center Park. If there's any questions about the events, you're more than welcome to contact the Hope Center. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. May 16th, the walk. Appreciate it. Anybody else with public comment on non-agenda items? And seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that agenda item. And next we have time set, but that's at 10 o'clock, so we have some time to get some other matters taken care of. So we'll go to G1, which is modification to the board meeting schedule and suggesting a cancellation of the May 9th board meeting. And I don't know that there's really much more to say about it than that. So do we have any questions, clarifications from the board? Go ahead, Supervisor.
No, I asked for the item to be brought forward. Two members are going to be gone, and I believe another member has to leave early for travel. That's what you said last week. So anyways, that's why I brought it forward for discussion.
Yep, nice to have a full board. Okay, any other comments? Questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and go to Zoom and see if we have any comments, public comment. We've got 7718, *6 to unmute.
Keeping this brief, I support your campaign.
You're kind of muffled there. And did we lose you?
Hello, keeping that brief, I support your canceling that meeting. Can you hear me?
Yes, we heard you. Thank you for your brevity. Appreciate it. And clarity. Thank you. Anybody else in Zoom? No, I don't see any other hands up for this item. So we'll go here to the audience today. Anybody here would like to comment? This is an opportunity to come forward and comment on this specific agenda item. And seeing none, bring it back to the board.
I'll make a motion to approve this item and thank Supervisor Bushnell for it's really a housekeeping item. I just appreciate the attentiveness to that. So we have a couple of board members that will be out of town at some meetings and some other things, and so this is very helpful. So thanks.
Second.
So we have a motion by Supervisor Wilson and a second by Supervisor Bushnell. And with that, we'll go ahead and go to our voting tabs.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, and moving right along, we'll go to item G2, which is consider a 1% contribution of the Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Funds, also known as LATCF, to the newly created National Center for Public Lands Counties, or the Center. And Supervisor Bushnell sponsored this, so I'll take it to her.
Thank you. I sponsored this because I'm the CSAC sitting member, and this was a CSAC discussion, and we had a lot of talk about it and consideration at our last meeting. I realize our budget is not rosy, and but I do want to have the discussion with the board and see where everybody's at. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think the staff report was very informative.
Great, thank you for bringing it forward. Any other questions, clarifications from the board before we go out to public comment? Seeing none, I'll go to the Zoom first. And I do not see any hands up in Zoom. So we'll go to those here in the audience today. Anybody that would like to speak on this particular item, this is your opportunity. Please come forward. Seeing none, we'll bring it back here to the board for discussion. Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. So I would just like CAO Hayes to kind of chime in a little bit. I know it makes her a little squishy. So if we could get some thoughts, please.
Sure. The specific revenue source that is identified through this agenda item is the Local and Tribal Consistency Fund. This was a windfall that the county received last year of $3.1 million. Your board has allocated $1 million of that to the earthquake recovery efforts. So the remaining funds remain held for your board's deliberation through the budget process. Those funds are rather flexible in how they can be used. We're really only prohibited from using them for lobbying efforts. But those are dollars that could be potentially used in this coming year for things like closing our budget shortfall. We are expected to have a very, very significant shortfall next year, and it will be a difficult budget year for your board's consideration. So I would just ask that you take that into account as you deliberate on this decision, that every penny is really going to count for us in this next year.
Great, thank you, CAO Hayes. Supervisor Wilson.
Thank you. I reviewed this item. I'm not in favor or enthusiastic about it. It's not just also the cost element. I mean, and it was interesting that you said the money is not to be used for lobbying. It was interesting because when I read this item, it was about telling the story of counties that have public lands associated with them, which sort of feels lobbying adjacent to me. And I feel like we have a lobbyist already at the federal level and and we have them at the state level as well. And so for me, I'd like to see the performance of this organization before we decide it's of value to us in particular. That being said, I do appreciate that, you know, counties do band together on certain issues. I'm just not sure that this particular organization is a good fit for us in terms of funding at this time.
Any other board members? Yes, Supervisor Bohn.
Yeah, I think, and we're also helping our other counties. I mean, I know we don't have as much public lands as, say, Trinity or Del Norte, but we have a good portion of it as public lands. Return on our money on this seems to be, it's a one-time investment to get it up and running. And it's a way to support WIR and CSAC too. I mean, we support organizations that aren't as based as those two. So, and you're right, we have a lobbyist, but we don't pay near the amount of money when we're talking rural funds and things like that. This is where we get ate up, pill, safe routes, all of the things that we need monies back. We have roads that are focused where we have BLM properties at the end of the road, but trying to get funds to work on our roads. There is an avenue, but it's like, you know, pulling teeth on a tiger to get those funds. And I mean, I think about the Lost Coast, I think about Lighthouse Road, I think about, there's a multitude of them. They did a great job at Bull Creek, I can't give them credit on that. But I mean, you take a look at all these places that we are, the Guthrie, Fleener out there. I mean, we make those a national monument area, and then we don't give any money to our roads. And this allows people that have public lands to, and I know there's a lot to it, but to get that funding and for the small investment, it's almost like a gamble to see how it works. I mean, it would be easy to do if we all took $6,000 out of our travel budgets, and within these tough economic times, maybe we shouldn't be going to as many things as we go to, because Zoom is still available and tapes and stuff like that. So I'm in favor of it because I've seen WIR, CSAC are two organizations that we belong to and have paid dividends on what we get out of them as long, you know, so I don't have a problem with this. We just, one-time funds, I I still want a stoplight at Oak and F, which had an accident there this weekend, but anyway, I don't have a problem with it.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? I'll throw my comments in. I do think it's important for us to be able to get these PILT funds. It's the payments in lieu of taxes that come as part of this process, along with the SAS, which supports schools. I've been involved in this a lot in the past, not so much more recently, but it's kind of gained a life of its own. And I do understand the need to be able to support it. I very much do. But frankly, right now with our budget crisis, frankly, I think is a good word to use for it, I'm not real inclined to be spending any new monies on things until we unravel this budget process over the next couple of months. I realize it's only $30,000, but you know, that's $30,000. And frankly, if it were up to me, I'd probably take that $2 million and put it into roads right now that we have, because it's unrestricted. But again, we're going to have a very vibrant board discussion and deliberation with our department heads and our community in regards to our budget moving forward. So that's not on the agenda today, but that's just my thoughts on it at this time. Any other board comments, thoughts? Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody weighing in. That's really why I brought it. I know that it was going to be, you know, a conversation there. You know, it doesn't say the suggestion is 1%. It could be, it could be less. It could be 5,000. It could be 25,000. It could be, let's bring it back at mid-year and see where we're at. And so I'm open to any of those thoughts. I do think that CSAC is a really good organization that we utilize heavily in all of the counties and this county. And I think an effort from this board, you know, to be supportive and as supportive of other counties that have larger public lands is something that we should consider.
Great. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for bringing it forward. And I like that idea of keeping it on the table for consideration, perhaps in the future. With that, we'll go to public comment and going. I did, that's right, and we brought it back. All right, thank you for that. Apologize, we've already had public comment on this.
Can the public speak to what Rex just said?
No, we don't go around back and forth, sorry, out of efficiency's sake, but thank you. So at this point, what is the pleasure of the board?
So I would like to make a motion that we revisit in 6 months and see what things look like, and then possibly have consideration for maybe a reduced amount, or for, if we're looking a little better than we thought, maybe for the amount of the 1%.
Okay, it's a motion to bring it back 6 months. Mm-hmm. Is there a second for that motion? I will second that motion. And so with that, any final comments from the board? Supervisor Wilson?
Yeah, I would ask that maybe that the motion maker, instead of making this automatic, that maybe you bring it, if you want to bring it back in 6 months, then bring it back in 6 months.
I'm going to leave it where it's at, Mike. I'm going to bring it back in 6 months. So.
All right.
Well, I think that option exists either way, so. Sure. But thank you for that. Supervisor Arroyo?
To add some nuance to that request, I feel similarly. I'd like to see how the organization is structured and what kinds of activities it's undertaking. I realize the 501c3 cannot do primarily lobbying, but they can do some. So I would kind of want to be sure that if this is the funding stream we're considering, that's not their, you know, the activities they're engaged in. That said, you know, I don't know that 6 months will be enough time to form the organization, have a full idea of their scope. Do you feel differently about that?
I'm not asking, that's not the reason I want to bring it back.
Bushnell.
Thanks, Chair. I'm considering our own budget, and I don't have questions about the organization itself. It's been fully vetted by CSAC, and I would, you know, I'm not going to say CSAC's going to say we're going to send 1% for lobbying when that money is not able to be used as lobbying. I wouldn't even want to go there and suggest that. And so I'm asking for the 6 months to examine our own budget, because the money would be coming out of our own budget.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Did you finish, Supervisor Arroyo? I apologize for interrupting.
I think I got the main point across. I just, you know, we have a lot of flexibility with these funds, but the fact that they're, you know, there are a lot of funding streams that can't be used for any kind of lobbying, and sometimes lobbying can be a little bit hard to define because there's outreach and advocacy, and then there's lobbying, and sometimes that line's a little blurry. But anyway, that was my only concern is, I know founding a nonprofit and starting it up can take some time, and getting going through a planning process and staffing it up and all of those things. So I was just wondering if we might want to give it a little more time. But it sounds like 6 months is what you'd like to do. So I hear you.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, our voting tabs are up, so we'll go ahead and vote.
Supervisor Bohn, do you have your vote tab up? There. Thank you. Motion passes 3-2.
Okay, thank you very much. So at this point, our next item on the agenda, and we do have a time set at 10 o'clock, is that slightly flexible?
That is slightly flexible, Chair Madrone.
Okay, we'll try not to push it out too far, but at this point, we'll go to our next item on the agenda, staying in order here, and that is H1, which is a board resolution affirming our stance against hate. And do we have anybody presenting? CAO Hayes, please.
Yeah, I can take that on. Thank you, Chair Madrone. Last week or weekend, your board received an email that was forwarded to all of you that contains some really hurtful and hateful language that was brought to my attention, and also to our diversity, equity, and inclusion team's attention, as well as the sheriff's attention, because it was a very repulsive language that was being used. So accordingly, staff has been working very diligently over the last week to determine what the best approach and response was to that language, recognizing that it's been circulating through our community and that it is hurtful, not only to our community members, but also to our staff. So I would ask Jeremy Clark, Dr. Jeremy Clark, to come up to answer any questions your board may have as our diversity, equity, and inclusion manager. And he also has Natalie Rubio Mills, who has been, I have it backwards, right? Rubio Mills, sorry. She was with our office once and it was different then. Natalie is also with us. She is the equity manager in Health and Human Services and has assisted right next with Jeremy in developing this letter and formulating a response.
Great, thank you very much, CIO Hayes. Dr. Clark, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, I'm happy that we could talk about something a little less complex and controversial, like DEI and hate speech. I am here to just answer any questions that you, that this board may have regarding the response or, yeah.
Supervisor Wilson.
Yeah, this is just there's been some discussion around, at least, in the community, around whether or not a response like this, and I think we're doing the right thing, but whether it is giving air to something that maybe doesn't deserve it. And I just, and there's sort of discussion on both sides, and I was kind of wondering if you have an opinion on that and what you might offer.
Yeah. Thank you, Supervisor Wilson. That was a consideration when we sort of looked at this issue and were sort of brainstorming or think-tanking about what an appropriate response would be. I want to make sure I choose my words carefully. For those of us that have responsibility for organizational culture, creating an inclusive workplace, or just general leadership responsibilities, right? I think that we came to the conclusion that these words hurt. And by we, I mean CAO Hayes, Director Ohanan, myself, Natalie. The words on paper still hurt, regardless whether they were written with the intent to troll, whether they were written to elicit some sort of reaction. Once it became clear that this message had been distributed widely throughout our community, we felt it really important to sort of really double down. And that's why the language of the letter is really intentional, that we are affirming that stance against hate speech. And so I guess to answer your question, we thought of it, but we felt like when really faced with that dichotomy of sort of erring on the side of caution and condemning such repugnant language, or sort of just not giving it any air, that we would err on the side of staff any day of the week.
Through the chair, I appreciate that answer. I mean, that is, because frankly, it's an interesting dynamic, because we get a communication like that, and we're individually dissecting that and analyzing that, and emotionally responding to it, and then thinking about what's the best response through this, through our position in this institution and in this, community organization.
Sure.
And so it's great when it's reflected back to us that we're moving in that right direction, and as a body. So I just wanted to appreciate that, we're both leading but also asking for advice on these things, and I appreciate that very much. So I mean, that was really the only question I had with relationship to this. I think this is an absolutely appropriate response in the moment, and we'll always have to do more. It's just the way it is. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
So, any other questions? I mean, I'm happy to provide any insight I can.
No, I think, Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. So along with what Supervisor Wilson said and your comments, Dr. Clark, I think we all have received quite a bit of conversation around the email that we received. And, the one thing that really, it has instilled fear. And the fear is, besides just words, and it really, the words are powerful.
Sure.
And the fear base that it put into community is just not okay in any way. And so I maybe to expand on what you said a little bit more, and to add that fear base, it's not right to have to live in fear, no matter what you choose in your life. And so I really do support this as well. And then I also, if I could just address Chair Madrone, there was a general comment earlier about, you brought this forward and you supported this, and maybe some clarification there on what the chair's role is, that we all haven't signed this because it has to come in this format first, and then we can sign on. And so that's not fair to you either. And I'm sure you're fine because you already signed, but your role as our chair is to bring things forward.
Thank you, Supervisor Bushnell. No, I appreciate that. It's always a great opportunity to educate, right? And this is one of those processes where, as chair of the board, I sign a lot of things because that's the role of the chair.
Sure.
And I do support this. So my name's behind that, not just because I'm chair, but also because I support it. But yeah, we'll see today where we're at with the board, but I think I'm seeing some pretty strong support for it. We very much appreciate your work, your staff's work in trying to help us all as a community lower the anger, lower the, all the kind of fighting and division in our world, right? And to say things that were said in this email that were so hurtful and threatening to many people is just not okay. So as a board, with our staff, we brought this forward. And I think it would be appropriate to go ahead and read the resolution into the record so that those out there that don't have it in front of them can understand what we said in this resolution. So I'll go ahead and do that at this point. But first, back to you.
Yes, if I may, Supervisor Madrone, and pardon the intrusion, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the swiftness with which we were able to collaborate. I'm so impressed. I got to be honest, I think this is probably I'm most proud to be a county employee and a resident of Humboldt County. I mean, if you look at this letter, the leaders, leader upon leader of organization upon organization, regardless of what they look like, what they demonstrated with this commitment and with this letter was that regardless of what you look like or what challenges you may have, we can find that language repugnant. And I was so impressed by that, and I would like to acknowledge and thank our partners for their support. I mean, short of a natural disaster, when do you see collaboration to this extent happen so quickly?
Absolutely.
I was thoroughly impressed.
Yeah.
So I just had to say that.
Well,
So,
I think it's
thank
very
you.
appropriate. I was honored yesterday to be able to speak to some new incoming employees in the morning, along with CIO Hayes, and we are a team of people that are trying to respect each other, work together for our community. So I agree. It was swift, and I appreciate the hard work. So,
Thank you. We appreciate support from your board to lead on this issue. CAO Hayes, absolutely. Appreciate her leadership, Director O'Hannon. Yeah, just top marks for everyone.
Thank you, Professor.
Chair Madrone, may I?
Supervisor Bushnell.
Could I suggest that maybe Dr. Clark read the resolution?
That would be fine. I think
Oh,
actually
boy.
it'd be even better. You got it in front of you there?
I don't. These are like my notes. I always roll extemporaneously, and
No
so I wrote
worries.
some comments and I didn't even use them. So, what's
All
that?
right.
You don't have it memorized?
No, oh gosh, no.
There's a copy right here if you would like to read it, and we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Actually, can I switch it up real quick and
Yeah.
ask my colleague Natalie to come read it with me? I mean, we work so closely.
I think that'd be great. Please, Natalie.
Strength in numbers.
Great, thank you.
I was not going to come up and talk today, but
Ah.
I'm with you.
Wow.
Hi,
Instead,
everyone.
you could start us
Welcome.
off.
You got the mic.
Okay, well, I'm not, okay. Do I read all the whereases? What's
Yes,
The, oh,
read
okay.
the-
Just want to know protocol. Great. So, resolution on the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors concerning recent hate, of the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors concerning recent hate events in Humboldt County. Whereas the County of Humboldt is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion of all religions, ancestries, and ethnicities, regardless of immigration status, as well as people of any disability, gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity, and sees diversity and inclusion as essential to the achievement of organizational goals. And whereas all people deserve peace and respect over a hate, and whereas all people are created equal, and there's no room for any form of identity-based intolerance in our society, and whereas there has been an increase in discrimination, hateful, derogatory language, and acts of hate towards BIPOC, Two-Spirit, LGBTQIA+ identifying and religious communities in the United States and in Humboldt County, and
Whereas racism and identity-based hate is wrong, abhorrent, dangerous, and contrary to the principles, foundations, and values of our nation and country. Whereas the County of Humboldt stands for openness, acceptance, and diversity. And whereas residents of Humboldt County should never have to fear for their safety because of the color of their skin or who they love. And whereas the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors believes we can stop the spread of hatred, bigotry, and prejudice and overcome ignorance and inhumanity by promoting learning and education as the powerful and proactive foundation of racial empathy, cultural competency, solidarity, and justice. And
whereas marginalized groups are valued members of our community, and we stand in solidarity and support of their health, safety, and welfare. And whereas the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors pledges its recommitment to building a more inclusive and equitable county that prioritizes inclusivity in how we communicate with one another and rejects falsehoods that put individuals at risk.
now, therefore, be it resolved by the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors as follows, and I'll let you bring us on.
Oh, well, thank you. Be it further resolved that the Board of Supervisors of the County of Humboldt hereby affirms its stance against hate and its dedication to combating divisiveness and acts of intolerance while enhancing and strengthening communities of Humboldt County. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, what was it, John Lennon that said, love is all you need? So, in his honor. So Supervisor Bushnell.
I was just, should we get a motion because we did the resolution?
We can do that.
and then go forward from there.
Yes, and then we're going to do public comment. So, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the resolution.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we're going to go ahead and go to public comment. And I'll start out with those in Zoom, as always. And we have 3 hands up. We've got 0116. This is your opportunity. Star 6 to unmute, and you've got 3 minutes. Welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, it's Ash Teeter again with Lost Coast Populist. And to me, part of this seems kind of ridiculous. I'm regurgitating the same hate resolution previously put forth. It also seems kind of strange that it was only like a couple weeks ago that Dottie and myself went down to the Ferndale City Council meeting to speak on their hate resolution, which a few days later was voted down 3-2 at their meeting, a subsequent meeting. And flash forward to last week, where someone who identifies as a marginalized individual from this resolution took it upon themselves to leave the most hateful comment I've read this year on our petition as some kind of sting operation to see how quickly we would take the comment down, only to be followed up by the article that Lost Coast Outpost admitting that they knew it was a troll who wrote the comment, yet somehow trying to fling mud on our news group. Something that feels kind of orchestrated as a response to the failure of the hate resolution passing in Ferndale. I also find it strange looking at the timing of the release of the Lost Coast Outpost article and the hate resolution by the county, like only hours apart. I must ask, were you working together on this story? Is this an example of collusion between local government and local media to push a political narrative? As it was stated previously, the collaboration, even between the county itself and other operatives putting this narrative forward, appeared very rapid. Whether it was intentional or not, it looks bad, as well as ridiculous. A marginalized individual writes an insanely hate-filled comment on our petition, and the county's response is to join forces with local media and condemn our news group and release a proclamation in support of marginalized people like this who wrote the hateful comment. Tell me how that makes sense. Truth be told, myself and others, the small but mighty members of Lost Coast Populist, are feeling kind of marginalized as well right now. Any way the county could draft up a resolution about how we're being treated? Since this resolution directly involves a petition on our news group's website, I request that we are granted more than 3 minutes comment and have an actual discussion about this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, commenter. And next we have 0151. Star 6 to unmute. There you go. Welcome.
Hi, this is Dottie and Graham Russell, and we're talking about the concept of fear and living in Humboldt County in fear. I think if we're going to address fear, we should really address all people and all fears, because I loved what Michelle said about none of us live in fear, but a lot of us do. And for myself, I definitely am fearful of a lot of things in Humboldt County, and I'm fearful of the planning department. And I don't think that's fair, and my family are all across the United States are fearful because we don't know what to expect. I think we can eliminate a lot of the fear. The other people that have done things that have never gotten to the district attorney's office to be resolved, that I was hit by a car. It was never really addressed very much, except for finally we managed to get him removed from Humboldt County. To bless everybody in Humboldt County, he intentionally hit me by a car with his car. So there are lots of things that cause us fear, and there's not any one thing that we need to promote to resolve more than another. So I'd like to be on a committee about how to find the fear and eliminate the fear. I brought up the ethics committee, which we used to have on the Board of Supervisors, whatever their committees are, and it should be brought forward again. The ethics committee for every community, an ethics committee for the Board of Supervisors. a special committee for eliminating fear. Love is indeed the answer, and we can all embrace that, and equality and fairness. And when that happens, Humboldt County will again lead California in being one of the most wonderful counties in the United States. I hope that we can all join together and eliminate fear. Thanks.
Thank you, commenter. And next we have 1041, *6 to unmute. There you go. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Donnie Creekmore with LostCoastPopulist.com. We have a website with the petition section that you guys are all aware of. It's at right/petition. We did this because one of our subscribers posted a petition to change.org titled "End Drag Events in Humboldt County." And this petition, although containing no foul language, was removed by change.org. After this was taken down and the language was provided to us by the author, we didn't see any problem with the language, and so we provided a similar space online. And just like change.org, we provide the ability to have the comments that are left on the signatures auto sent to decision makers like you guys. Okay, and in no way, shape, or form do we endorse the signatures and the comments that are sent to you. And nowhere on our website does it say that we do this. And as you know, an individual or group left a revolting, threatening, and hateful, repulsive comment that was sent to you guys automatically. Subsequently, the same person logged in and then reported themselves to have done it in complete fakeness. And they were just completely acting out a caricature and and basically explained in their own words that they faked it. We have the IP address of this person and all of the comments they made. All of the comments were made at the IP address 47.208.148.41. If you use IP to location.com, you'll find that this lands at Open Door Community Center in Eureka, California. And these comments were made at multiple different days at multiple different times. So it's basically, you can rest your hat on the fact that this was the person and this is where they did it. We support the Humboldt Board of Supervisors in their quest to get to the bottom of this and to shine a light on the perpetrator of this unfortunate situation. We are unaware of any crimes that they committed so far, other than lobbing some pretty much obviously fake threats. But we are willing to support HCSO in its investigative process. We've contacted them ourselves, and we provided all of the data that we have directly to the Sheriff's Office. That being said, your resolution no longer has a real threat to point toward. Given the fact we petitioned to end drag events for kids in Humboldt County, referring to legal minors and the fact that they shouldn't be able to attend a drag performance in any way, and that's the fact that the signatures
30
now
seconds.
Been fake, been seen to be a fake, there's really no reason for this. So I've got some questions. Do you support drag events for legal minors as a body or individuals? Do you support an all-age burlesque where young male minors can hand cash to tips to scantily clad female dancers? R-rated movies and above are limited to 17-year-olds and older unless accompanied by a parent or legal guardian. Is this proper protocol for drag and burlesque events?
Thank you, commenter. Appreciate your input. And next we have 7718, *6 to unmute. There you go. Welcome.
Hello. Is my reception better now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, last time I was 40 feet up in the air on the roof, and it was a little windy up there while I was doing some things. I found this to be an interesting topic. I appreciate, really support everything Don said. I have no problem with you moving forward with this. Hate can be a very detrimental thing to many people. And then I did some Googling. I wanted to see what a hate crime was and a few things like that. And when it gets to be a crime, my understanding is a threat of physical violence, and then that would be assault, and then battery would be when you actually engaged in physical violence. Fortunately, none of that happened here. I think people, if there is somebody who's been done what they've accused of doing, I think they should be prosecuted in some way, shape, or form. Kind of like yelling fire in a theater. I don't think that's proper. I just wish that, hate wasn't so prevalent in our world. You got one religious group that hates the other ones to the point where they say you should go kill them. Other ones have the same thing. It's just it's an overwhelming thing in the world, and as long as man's here, there's going to be hate. All we can do is try and minimize it, and I have no problem. In fact, I support you moving forward this resolution. But remembering what Dottie said regarding everybody, and everybody should have the right not to fear. Thank you for my opportunity to speak. Oh, lastly, monitoring a website can be very difficult. Humboldt County Craigslist for a time period had a penthouse-style woman killing everything that was to be shown and described what she wanted to do with those things. And so that was taken down, and I think responsible websites can't all the time, control everything that goes out, especially automatically or things of that nature. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, commenter. And last, we have in Zoom 7548, *6 to unmute. There you go. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and all supervisors for the time to address the board on this topic. My name is Reverend Tyrell Bramwell. I'm the pastor of St. Mark Lutheran Church down here in Ferndale, and for the past few months, the Ferndale City Council considered an anti-hate resolution modeled in part after the resolution that your board recently passed and is reaffirming today or considering to do that today. When you first passed it, your video recorded record notes of this included the church's warning, my warning on our sign of a drag show for kids. You included that as precedent for why we needed to speak against hate, inferring that my speech was hateful. Warning someone to drive on the right side of the road isn't a hateful message. Warning someone of a potential danger isn't hateful. It's mere speech that passersby can take or not. I think this was inappropriate on your part. I think this whole conversation is inappropriate. I also think it's dangerous, especially given that at least one of the board members, Vice Chair Bohn, is aware that the church that I serve, my family, my children, myself, have been threatened with violence, death, rape, burning down of our home, and experienced actual real property damage at the church. Last week, the Ferndale City Council voted not to overreach its vocational authority and to leave the First Amendment to address all manners of speech in our community. I was disheartened as a resident of Humboldt County that the same wisdom did not prevail among your body and is not prevailing now, so it would seem. But thankfully, our city fathers didn't follow your lead. I'd like you to consider the reality that the county literally has staff members who just spoke that are paid to promote DEI tenets, which are in direct opposition to biblical teaching that as a Christian pastor, I'm called and ordained by God to address as contrary to Scripture. I have a duty to speak to these issues in my vocation out of love for my neighbors, all of them. The county's action is stirring up hate. My Lord has prepared me to be hated by civil authorities, and he's now preparing our church members as well through this whole episode. But you encourage the disdain and people in our county that disdain the church. You're driving a wedge between people. I know you're not intending to do that, but that is what's happening. My specific comment this morning is for Supervisor Bohn as our district supervisor. Ferndale looks to you for leadership, sir. Please be aware that your motions and your votes
30 seconds.
have consequences for the city leaders in Ferndale and for the Christians in Ferndale who are being hated by LGBTQ activists and using your actions as precedent for their actions, affirmation for their actions. When you acquiesce the inference that a church in Ferndale is engaging in hate, you are giving credence to that lie. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, commenter. And now we'll bring it here to the audience. If anybody here today would like to speak on this particular item, this is your chance to come forward. Yes, please, welcome.
No, this is not a speech. I didn't have any plans to speak at all today, but this topic is very dear to my heart. I'm the chair of the Humboldt County Human Rights Commission, and we have a project underway called Humboldt, Better Together. And I think this resolution, despite what we've heard from some of the other commenters, isn't negative. It's very proactive and very positive and speaks to what kind of a county we want to have. I'm also here as an individual who's part of one of those other groups, one of those vulnerable groups in our community. And it's important to me to make sure that people younger than myself don't have to be raised in a community where they are fearful, no matter what their persuasions are or whatever their physical situation or mental situation is, that they shouldn't be afraid of people who are trying to other them. I won't dwell on that any more than I have, but it's important to me. And I want to compliment the board for considering this motion and this resolution. I thought the wording was excellent, and I would support it any day of the week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, commenter. Anyone else here today? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board, and we do have a motion and a second. Is there any final comments? Supervisor Arroyo. I'm sorry, excuse me. I had her in the queue first. Okay, it's okay. Thank you. Supervisor Bushnell. That was my error, my apology. She had told me before.
So I wanted to address a couple of the comments that were made, and I am, I think, well, I'll speak for myself that sometimes I don't know the correct way to go about things, and I've spoken with Dr. Clark about that to help myself. And in part of this resolution, it says, there has been an increase in discrimination, hateful, derogatory language, and acts of hate towards. And it lists a section of lots of things, including religious communities. And so I think it's very inclusive of all. It's not just inclusive of one. And when the first commenter online today, I think, was defending the petition, and we're not addressing the petition, we're addressing the hateful language that came from the petition. That commenter is part of Lost Coast Populace and has a right, just like everyone else, to put that petition out. What we are, unless you wrote that comment, we're not addressing your petition. We're addressing the comment that came through your petition to this board. And I'm sorry that you feel, well, by your comment, felt targeted, but that was not the case, again, unless you wrote that comment. And I think that's very important to recognize the difference. We're not addressing your petition. We're addressing the community that wrote and signed your petition, specifically one comment. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Supervisor Arroyo.
Well, thank you so much for our staff for putting this together quickly, and I will echo the sentiment that I was very pleased to see how quickly staff acted. To put a finer point on it, the message that was sent to us was frankly terrifying. It involved a very real physical threat. And we take those things seriously. We have to. I mean, anytime there's any kind of threat of violence at a school, they lock down the whole school. Sadly, today we have to take these things pretty darn seriously. And because it was sent to so many folks, it really made its way out into the community beyond just elected officials. So it also scared the crap out of people. And so I don't think the point is whether or not this was a real threat. The point is that there are many people in our community who experience hate speech, who are vulnerable and being targeted. And frankly, all of us here on the board live with a lot of relative privilege, and there are a lot of folks in our community who don't. So I see this as the very least we can do to stand up for our values and to make them explicit and clear and reaffirm them. So for me, as others have already said, it's kind of besides the point. And as even the local media said, maybe the statement itself was maybe a nothing burger, but the impact that it had was very real. And so this resolution, I think it's what very well put, that we reject falsehoods that put individuals at risk. So the statements that were made might have been falsehoods. I really don't know. I don't know how hateful that person truly is or how likely they are to carry out something. And our community can rest assured that we also involved law enforcement in responding to that, as we would any threat of physical violence. So, you know, while those might be falsehoods, that kind of rhetoric does put individuals at risk and makes them afraid to live their lives, and puts them in a higher category of risk for some of our biggest public health crises like suicide. So all of this is extremely important. It matters, and I truly don't want to downplay it by saying, oh, well, that one threat, you know, maybe wasn't real. It felt very real, and for many people, it's real in their everyday lives. And I will continue standing up for folks in our community when it comes to issues of justice.
Supervisor Bohn and then Supervisor Wilson.
Yeah, fully agree with everything that's being said. I moved the resolution for one reason. I do like this resolution better than the last one because we don't pull anybody out. We make a general statement that what we're saying is, I mean, let's go back to Rodney King. Can't we all get along? I mean, since we're going to quote people. But I mean, as we move forward, we're not going to get rid of hate. And I can guarantee you I've got more phone calls and death threats than anybody up here over the last 11 years. And I'm terrible. I don't react to them because and maybe I should more often than not. But this statement is general. It's common sense, which lately myself and a lot of people are lacking some days, but we need to address this, and that's why we address. This isn't about going after anybody's petition, anybody's feelings, anybody's sayings. It's just there are going to be contrasting opinions, and that's kind of where we go. And I'm going to go a little bit off topic, but we've talking about fears and threats and everything else, and then the last few days, I have noticed more fear amongst our staff with, I don't know if anybody, I'm in the office every day. I don't know if anybody's noticed how many people yesterday we had somebody throwing F-bombs, multiple F-bombs, screaming at the front counter. And we're expecting our wide open front counter. So you're going to be seeing something coming from me that we make that safer for our staff up front. Because I've heard fear and threat because we get an email or a phone call. They face it in person every day because they face the people that are mad at us before we ever get to face them. They come back and get us, or not in some occasions. So I appreciate this resolution because it moves what everybody should feel in a roundabout way. I'm not going to comment on all the other stuff, but I just think it's a good way to start. And I mean the whole resolution and Jim, I really appreciate what you said. I've known Jim for over 50 years, so. And I've considered him a friend the whole time, but I think for him to stand up and what as much as he goes, and congratulations for your award from the League of Women's Voters the other day, which was very deserved. But I think as we move forward, we could all do better. But when we don't do better, don't use it as a weapon, use it as a learning tool. Because a lot of times things are said and it becomes a weapon to use for other reasons, and I said then that diminishes the whole context. So I appreciate this. It was very well written. I appreciate staff reacting to this. It was better written than the last one. So thank you.
Thank you. And Supervisor Wilson, final comments here.
I just want to strongly align myself with the words of Supervisor Arroyo with relationship to this response being really necessary in relation to the words and no matter the intent. And that we really, I think that in speaking to the analogy with relationship to how we deal with threats in our schools, I think is very apropos. I think it works very well because that is exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to continue to respond in this way or in other ways, and with the same level of seriousness. I think that is something we need to keep doing, and I just really, again, Supervisor Arroyo really put a point on it in a way that I think was perfect. I also believe that the platforms by which these things exist are ever evolving, but also the folks and the institutions that that manage the platforms, and what I mean by it's either online or in print or whatever that is, also bear some responsibility in these situations, and how they react and respond tells us a lot. And I think and people can take from that what they want. So with that, I strongly support this resolution and the work of our staff and really the entire community and family of county employees with relationship to this. I really appreciate your work.
Thank you. Supervisor Bushnell.
I know we're doing last comments. I just really want to recognize also, along with our staff that wrote this, and the words of this board, because I do support each comment, that the sheriff and the sheriff's department also reacted instantly and take these things very seriously, because they have to be. You can't say, oh, it's not serious. How do we know that? And fear is not whether I'm scared. Fear is whether you're scared. If you say you're in fear, that's true and that's real to a person. And so also thank you to the sheriff's department that responded instantly and took it very seriously, to our staff that took it very seriously, and this board, and every signature that came with it from the community that signed and said, we consider this serious language and we're not going to put up with it.
Thank you. And I guess we'll go ahead and, seeing as how we're way beyond our closed session time set, we'll wrap it up here and ask everybody to cast their votes. And if you don't have your voting tabs up.
Supervisor Bohn, do you have your voting tab?
It went
Okay,
dead.
I'll do a roll call.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Supervisor Bohn?
Sure.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Absolutely.
Supervisor Arroyo?
Yes.
And Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And so at this point, we're going to go to our closed session items and ask for our county counsel to read what they are, and then we'll take public comment.
Thank you, Chair Madrone. It is the intention of the board to meet in closed session pursuant to California Government Code Section 54956.9D1 in order to discuss existing litigation in the cases of White Circle Commerce LLC et al. Versus County of Humboldt, Humboldt County Superior Court case numbers CV 20000513 and CV 20000623, and Christopher Conway versus County of Humboldt et al., Humboldt County Superior Court case number CV 230070.
Thank you, County Counsel. And now we'll go to public comment before we recess. I do not see any hands up in Zoom, so we'll go here to the room. Anybody here today wanting to comment? Seeing none, we are in recess, and I estimate that we'll be back 40 minutes, less than an hour.
I would say 30 to 45 minutes, Chairman.
Thank you very much, County Counsel. Okay, we are in recess. All right, welcome back to the Board of Supervisors meeting, and it is still morning, and we have 2 items left on the agenda, but first we'll have a report out on our closed session items.
Thank you, Chair Madrone. There was no reportable action taken with regard to item F1. With regard to item F2, the board voted unanimously to authorize the risk manager to enter into an agreement with the Mitchell Law Firm for defense of the case of Christopher Conway versus County of Humboldt et al., Humboldt County Superior Court Case Number CV 2300070.
Great, thank you very much. And with that, we're going to move on to item H2, which is consider the appointment of an at-large member to the Audit Committee, and we have the ever-capable Deputy Clerk of the Board, Tracy D'Amico.
Good morning, Board. So a vacancy was posted on the Audit Committee on April 4th, and this was due to the term expiration of Corey Weber. The vacancy was posted, and we did not receive any other applications. Corey was reached and would like to be reconsidered for appointment, and that is the recommendation before your board today.
Great, very straightforward, thank you. Supervisor Bushnell.
I would just like to make a motion for staff recommendation to reappoint Corey Weber.
Second.
Great, we have a motion by Supervisor Bushnell and a second by Supervisor Wilson. Any additional comments from the board? Supervisor Arroyo.
Just that I will have to do a roll call vote. I'm sorry, I'm not
No
fully
worries.
ready.
No worries. That's fine. Okay, and seeing no others, we'll go to Zoom and see if we have any comments there. There's nobody in the participants panel, so anybody here, all of those out there in the audience, you want to come forward? And looks like none. So at this point, we'll bring back to the board for a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair Madrone. We'll start with Supervisor Bohn.
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Yep.
Supervisor Madrone.
Yes.
Supervisor Arroyo.
Yes.
And Supervisor Wilson.
Yep.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
Perfect record. Okay, very good. Thank you, Tracy. And now we have our final item on the agenda, which is item H3, 2022 Pavement Management Program Update and Future Maintenance Funding Options and Supplemental Budget for CAO Management and Budget Team, Budget Unit 1100-103, requiring a 4/5 vote. So with that, is Director Mattson presenting?
Good morning, Chair Madrone, members of the board. Tom Mattson, Director of Public Works. I do have a presentation, but I don't have the mouse down here. So the item before you this morning, as you said, is an update on our pavement management condition, discussion of possible funding sources, and the recommendation to create an ad hoc committee to work with Public Works on that. And then again, the funding recommendation. And I do need to note that there's been some clamor out in the public that was all for the roads fund. That is actually for 4 different measures the county is looking at, not just for the roads measure. So it's not 336,000 to pull the public for the roads. It's 336,000 for the roads, Measure S, Finance Director, and one other item. So there's multiple items in there, and this is actually a joint report between Public Works and the CAO's office to cover all those items.
Great, thanks for that clarification right up front.
And our pavement management update, we do this through Humboldt County Association of Governments every 4 years. This is actually a 5th year that it's finally got done. Unfortunately, our roads are getting worse as projected in our 2017 pavement management study. Without additional funding, our road surfaces would get worse. So as you can see, last time we were at 55, which is in the fair condition. Now we are down to 49, which is in the poor condition. And we're off the cliff. We're going to rapidly deteriorate from here if we don't get additional funding to stop this from happening. Above you can see a brand new road, which is a condition 100, and a failed road, which is very poor and failed. Around the state, there's 6 counties that actually have roads in very good condition. Those are the more populous and wealthy counties. 44 counties are in the fair range, which we were in last time, and then there are 8 counties in the poor range with us. As you can see, the difference, this is a rural and an urban look at new roads. The brand new roads, the PCI is 100. As they start to deteriorate, they're still in pretty good shape. They can be salvaged with minimal maintenance costs, the slurry seals, chip seals. That keeps them in the 76 range. As they start to get worse, you start to see the cracking where you have to do dig outs. The repairs just start to go exponentially, the costs start to go up. This is where we were in 2017, PCI of around 55. The roads are still pretty usable, but again, the cost to maintain those pavement surfaces is starting to climb through the roof. And getting down to Humboldt County, where the roads are getting in very, very poor condition, and they're very expensive to bring back up to a good state of repair. And these are totally failed roads. Our PCI for our system is an average overall, so yes, we do have roads like this. We also have some very good roads, but it's the average overall that is bringing our whole system down. Within Humboldt County, through HCOG, we do the pavement management. We do the pavement management for all the cities and the county. As you can see, there are some cities that are in pretty good shape, and you can see that the county is dropping down. And we're in the same basket. Well, Rio Dell is going to go up, I can tell you that much. They've been putting a lot of money onto their roads, so that one will go up. But Blue Lake and Ferndale and the county are kind of in the same boat for the shape of our condition of our roads. So that was 2017. You can see in 2022, we've dropped. Rio Dell went up significantly. Trinidad dropped. Fortuna is the only other city that saw improvement in their pavement condition index over the last 5 years. As you can see, we're talking about the average, but when we look at reality of the percentage of the roads in good, fair, poor, or failed positions, you can see that we have a little bit in good. Those are mainly our high traffic arterials, where we're putting the money where most of the traffic is. We still have some pretty roads in fair condition, but we have over 50% of our roads in poor or failed condition. As you can see, this is just basically a cost chart, chip seal basically on a good road, that's about $160,000 a mile. When you get down to the overlay, you're talking $750,000 to $1 million a mile to bring that road back up into good shape. So it's very important that we have roads in good shape to minimize future costs and future maintenance costs. But the problem is, how do we get back there? As you can see, our pavement maintenance budget, this is not the overall road maintenance budget. That's about $10 million, but we put about $2 million a year just to pavement maintenance. City of Eureka, much smaller, puts $3 million. Arcata, much smaller, puts the same amount we do. So you can see it's really of a scale of things. We have 1,207 miles of road, which is exponentially larger than any of the cities. Our pavement maintenance budget, just per mile, to give some kind of rough average, is about $1,600 a mile, whereas Blue Lake is spending $80,000 a mile to maintain their on their pavement maintenance. And that's one of the reasons that our roads are going down, 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 is we just don't have the funds to do all the pavement maintenance we need to do. All of our, we have to do culverts, we have to do ditches, we have illegal dumping. There's so many other things that go into road repairs besides the pavement maintenance, but we really need to get additional funds for that. So you can see we have a huge need in the county for the county roads versus our available budget. As you can see, the cities, they all vary, but all of them are in better shape than the county. Ferndale's about the same as us for having the money available, but you can see some of the cities like Blue Lake, Arcata, and Eureka, and Fortuna have significantly more ability to fund their pavement maintenance than the county does. So if we say with the existing funding level that we currently have, we are projecting that in 10 years, or well, in this year, let me go back. In 2017, our PCI was 55. We went down to 49, and in 10 years, we're projecting it to drop to 25, which is a very, very bad road system. Everybody is projected to drop with this funding available within the entire county, and this is really a rural, not just rural California, it's a rural America problem. So we do have some items that we want to go through with you about possible funding sources. There's a general sales tax, that's a 50% plus one, a vote that could be used to help out roads, but that is not dedicated to roads. Just to throw out there, the half-cent sales tax right now is bringing in about $12 million a year, which would do, significant effect improvements on the county roads, significantly reduce the rate at which we're falling apart. The dedicated sales tax, that means that the citizens are guaranteed that money just goes to whatever the ballot measure is, if it's for roads, et cetera. I hear a lot of talk in the public about that because they're concerned that any additional tax would be diverted from the roads. This would guarantee the public, but again, it would require a 2/3 vote of the public. There's a parcel tax. Those are not used very often at all for roads. We do use them in our permanent road divisions, but that's just for basically subdivision roads where the people live, and it's the newer subdivisions. The board did enact that policy many years ago, looking into, the fact that we have roads coming in and no additional funding. The parcel tax that we do on these parcels at least guarantees those residents that their residential road to the main road will remain properly maintained with a series of slurry seals and an overlay projected in the future, and the funding gathered every year for that. But generally, these are not used. They're used more for schools than for county roads. There's the general fund, and of course, you all know the problems with the general fund. That is not something that I would want to rely on. What the roads needs right now is a long-term dedicated funding source that can be relied on and planned for. With the general fund and the ups and downs, that's very difficult, and especially with years like this where everybody's having to tighten their belt, it's very difficult to ask for roads for general fund when you're cutting other core services. There's Measure Z. We have been very competitive in our Measure Z applications. However, it just simply isn't enough. It is also an annual application, doesn't allow for really long-term planning. And as you are aware, this year there was very little funding available for anybody to compete with. And even though we were the 4th ranked project, the money didn't go past the 1st rank. There's development impact fees. These are really not for long-term road maintenance, where our problem is long-term road maintenance, not development impact fees. Most developments are conditioned for the impacts they put on them anyway. Development impact fees can be seen as a way of certainty for some developers because they know how much they're going to have to pay without having to do a lot of studies, but it really does nothing for long-term county road maintenance. And the final option we came up with is reducing the county maintained road system mileage. This is not an easy thing to do. The county looked into it years ago and got a significant amount of blowback from the public. While we would lose $417 per mile, that is very, very little based on what we need to maintain those roads. So it is an option. There may be some roads that are, not necessary. I would really, that's part of our ad hoc committee request, is to discuss that option and what kind of criteria we would look at if we were going to move forward in that system. Some of the roads that don't look like they're necessary actually are very necessary for emergency response and timely response to emergencies. It's very important that we have a redundancy in our road system, because as single roads go out, we have to have other ways in and out, and we've seen that in the Madrone Valley this winter. So I would be open to any questions that you might be having today on our road maintenance system, but I would really like to move forward with an ad hoc committee to discuss long-term revenue options and to get the money to move forward with the polling to see what the public would support. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Mattson. And I was looking at some data recently because this report came to us at HCOG as well, and it was quite an eye-opener. I mean, really, it very clearly shows the counties in the worst position. Yes, some of the cities also have serious problems, and going forward, all of us have problems with continuing to maintain these systems. But I was looking at some data that the state had developed that shows that on average, every car owner spends $900 a year related to road damage to their cars. So for instance, you hit the pothole and there goes your alignment. As your alignment goes out, then the wear and tear on your tires goes down, right? And suddenly this brand new pair of 4 tires that are nicely matched becomes 2 tires that are 1 tire that's wearing out really fast and the others last longer. And suddenly you're looking at piecemealing the replacement of your tires rather than being able to get full use out of those tires and go 4 years. So alignment, broken shocks, rim damage, flat tires, and the most important part, road safety. You know, people dodging potholes and going out into the other lane and other stuff. And then first responders, you know, being able to efficiently navigate these roads to get to the help that is needed. So, you know, if you think about that, I mean, nobody wants to pay more taxes. Nobody. But the fact is, we're already paying out, on average, $900 a year. And if you think about what a half-cent sales tax and how much purchasing you make, it's clearly far less to spend on sales tax as a person than to pay out this money on your car repairs. Some folks get more than others, depends on how much you go out into the rural areas, but I know that Supervisor Bushnell, Bohn, and myself can tell you that our rural roads are just atrocious at this point, and we got to do something. So I appreciate you bringing this forward and look forward to discussion from the board. So I'll open it up to the board. Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. Through the chair, Director Mattson, are you looking just for direction on the ad hoc today, appointing the ad hoc, or are you wanting suggestions from the board as well?
I would be open to both because the ad hoc needs to hear from the whole board as well so we can have proper direction to move forward.
So with that being said, I'm curious on the last item you had up there about evaluating the roads for discontinuing some county roads. What does that look like?
That looks at how many people are using the road, what kind of access it serves. Is there, you know, if it goes into a last property, maintaining it only to the property, making sure that, you know, fire and police are supportive, because once a road goes out of the system, people can do things like putting up gates and other things. So it would involve developing a criteria that we would be able to go through and apply to the road. It would not be some kind of random, I don't like you, I'm taking your road out of the system. It would be, let's apply the criteria, systematic, countywide, see what the roads are, and then go to the public and say, this is what we've come up with, and get their feedback. So it wouldn't be a unilateral thing on the county's part. It would be us basically scientifically coming up with a justification and seeing if the public could support it.
And then once it goes through that process, it would come to this board?
Then it would come and be the proposed for vacation.
So you had stated that you had done some of that work in the past and that it wasn't well received. I'm wondering the cost that it would, your department would incur for that kind of work again, or do you already have that data?
So that was before I started with the county, frankly, and it was done internally, and I would think we would do the same thing. I would not be looking to come up with, you know, funding for a consultant or anything else. It would be the upper tier of my department looking at, you know, and working with the board members on you know, coming up with that criteria. So it would be staff time and cost and board time and cost, but no additional outside money.
Okay, thank you for that.
Great, thank you. And Supervisor Arroyo.
I know we got a presentation about the road charge program that Caltrans is working on, and I figure since you're in the loop on all things road related, I wondered if you have any information about kind of how that process is going, how it might be, how or when it might be implemented, and then also kind of what proportion they're discussing go to local roads versus state highways.
Well, if it works anything like the old ways, the vast majority will go to the state. But they're still in the pilot program, understanding that the state of California has goals to have EVs everywhere by 2034. Something needs to happen sooner rather than later with better mileage. In fact, and with the existing system, us engineers are great about coming up with solutions, but not about funding them. This is no different than a water and wastewater treatment plant where we bill you for the amount of water you use and then tell you to use less water. So gas is the same way. We bill you for roads through gas, and then we encourage you to have better mileage vehicles and reduce your footprint. And so we're going, we go the opposite way in revenue than we do in what it costs to maintain things. So the road charge is still moving forward. Again, something has to give before everything goes electric. They did start, with SB1, they started putting fees finally on electric vehicles. But we are we're going to get into a vast and a fast transition period over the next decade or so as we move away from revenue based on fossil fuel to other sources, and whether that be the one you brought up or something else, there's still a lot of discussion out there about where we need to go, and no real solid answers, and nobody's even talked about the divvying it up of anything at this point. I would at this point have to assume it would be very similar to the current statewide allocations where, again, the state gets the most, and then the cities and the counties with 85% of the roads get less than half the money.
All right, thanks for that. Yeah, these are big discussions at HCOG and all over, and I think this is absolutely a place where CSAC and RCRC ought to be engaged, and I imagine they are, and I'm sure Rex and Supervisor Bohn and Supervisor Bushnell can tell us more about that. But it's so clear when you look around that state highways are very well funded to the point where, for instance, the paving from Arcata to Big Lagoon, they had just done it 5 years ago, right? And I think you're able to touch a road once every 30 to 50 years with new paving. I mean, it's
if we're lucky.
Yeah, if you're lucky. I mean, it's so obvious that the balance is not there that we need for local roads and such. So there's a lot of work to be done there. I will tell you, in my district, which McKinleyville is, the biggest population place in the district, over half of the roads in McKinleyville are private. And you just don't see that in cities, right? There may be some bad roads in cities, but you don't see half the roads in that community being private. And not only are they private, but they're primarily gravel and dirt roads, things like that. So I'm getting nothing but requests. People want to have us take care of their roads, and I have to explain, well, they're private. That's on you. And there's a lot of pushback from the community wanting their roads taken care of, not less of that. And I think you're right. The pushback from years ago would probably be even more so today. And then there's this thing called, we have the county maintained roads, and then we also have roads that are non-maintained, but they're still in the county system. And there was that point before you became director where a number of roads got moved out of maintained into non-maintained systems. So there was some changes. Is that the pushback that you're talking about to some degree, or? Well, that was just done internally, right?
Well, in the late 60s, the County Public Works did some changes internally about where they were maintaining roads. Some roads that were in the system got dropped out, not the entire roads, but portions of the roads. And then in the early 90s, the county started talking again about dropping roads out. And my understanding that politically there was a major issue with that just was not going to happen. Yeah. And if the public does not want that to happen, then we have to ask them to pay for what they want.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and again, with the way Measure Z's gone, which was a general obligation tax measure, 50% plus one vote to pass, we did reinforce the transparency around that funding and the use of that money for public safety by developing the Measure Z committee. But as was spoken to us last week by some committee members and others, that process has now gotten far more complicated in that there's very little discretionary money, and frankly, very little has gone to roads over that period of funding. So there's some issues there. For me personally, I want to make sure we get this money, and it's a lot easier to get it done with a general obligation. But if people aren't confident in that we're going to actually spend that money, towards certain things, then it may not pass even with a lower threshold. And I know in Measure Z and O, the language was, it will go to all these things and or possibly other general fund expenditures as a way to basically keep it at a 50% plus one vote. But again, if we do a good educational effort, and with the money we're considering spending here today, that will cover 4 different issues for potential ballot measures, not just the roads thing. I'm hoping that we can educate people, as I said, that you're already paying $900 a year on average, and it would be a lot cheaper to do this sales tax. But that's going to be a heavy lift to get to 67%. So, but I think one of those two is probably going to be my preference, but I look forward to the research that's going to be done by our consultants in regards to all this. So bring it back to the board, Supervisor Bohn, and then Supervisor Arroyo, and then Wilson.
No, and I know, I understand Director Matz, and what happened in the 50s and 60s is we absorbed a lot of half-mile roads throughout our system that had 1 or 2 houses on it because we had the money. And now we find ourselves delivering gravel and maintaining those and putting a blade to them, and we've actually got as creative as if you buy the pavement, we'll lay it, because in the long term that allows us not to take gravel, and that's, I think, still out there for some issues, because in the long term, and I've used it on numerous roads in our area, and then you don't have to go back and after every winter the rocks don't float out. With that being said, Director Matz got SB1 monies, which are the latest tech, which has been a windfall. I mean, $7 to $8 million a year for us.
5 to 6, but
Yeah.
it was projected to be up to the 7 and 8.
Yeah, and so and that's been a benefit. But in turn, the state, between admin and everything else, and I mean, Caltrans has been a great partner with us. I don't, you can't say anything but they. I did laugh the other day as they did a big, put this in perspective, District 1, which is Del Norte, Humboldt, Del Norte, Mendocino, Caltrans. They did a big presentation how they maintain 1,200 miles of road. And then you just heard how many miles of road we have, and we don't have the extent of, the office buildings, the orange, we don't have that many orange and white trucks running around.
How many miles was ours?
1,245?
Well, there you go.
1,207.
1,207, okay.
Wow.
I got those 33 that think they belong. No, but I mean, as we move along, I know RCRC, we've talked about trying to get some more SB1 funds, because I've heard it talked about we're repaving roads that we've already repaved. And I'm not going to, and Caltrans still has some roads that need some work done on it. But we're also going to have to jump up because, the electric vehicles are, what did we get? I think we were the highest, but 18% of all sales last year were electric vehicles. And they create more wear and tear because they're so much heavier than a gas-powered vehicle. But we don't get any return on them. So we're, they get a benefit of a road, and I'm not sure, and then we give them a tax credit to boot. So we're not getting any SB1 funds out of them necessarily. So we have to look at that. I spoke in front of a assembly hearing on local government week before last down in Sacramento, trying to justify getting our half cent because we will exceed the state average of 2%, because Eureka, and God bless them, and I love it because I drive on their roads, but they get 1.5 cents more sales tax than we do. 64% of all sales tax probably at Costco is outside the city and things like that, but more power to them, and that's allowed them to do so many of their things they're doing, and they are improving their roads. We're actually going, and we've been great on Harrison. We were partners with them on a paving thing there. We're actually partnering up to a small extent on Fairway Drive, which has got more traffic than I can ever believe, and wait till we pave that, and then we're going to see more people on F Street, but I won't say anything about Oak and F. But as we move forward, we're going to have to do something. And I think we're going to have to make a commitment, what we're going to do, how we're going to maintain our roads. People are going to want to know which roads we're going to maintain. We're going to have to be a lot more transparent. I think people will support road maintenance. And I know people that spend a lot more than $900 a year, but not as much since they fixed Bull Creek. But I mean, you know, the hitherlands of Petrolia, Honeydew, and those people out there, people coming over Alder Point, Bell Springs, New Harris, all those. I mean, they're taking a beating. So we're going to have to do something. We're going to have to bite a bullet. You know, we all say we're going to get more efficient and not raise taxes, but I mean, we did a gamble that maybe wasn't a good one. It was a good one, but we gave raises to employees, you know, to help their status of their livelihoods. To help Tom, we're working on Tom to keep, you know, his people in those respective positions, because it doesn't matter how much, you know, we still have to have personnel. I'm a big believer. Tom doesn't like it as much about some of these hitherland places. Maybe we look at somebody out in that area maintaining it instead of you know, going back and forth till we actually get fully staffed, things like that. But we're going to have to get creative, and I think the public's going to want to see something creative. I mean, I think Measure O, i.e. Measure Z, passed with 76% of the vote last time. So we could have been, I would have loved to have been more definitive and given it to where some of the places we said we'd give it to. Roads has taken a beating. I keep hearing we want to give roads more money, but then when it comes time to give them more money, they don't always get it. So I look at the sales, I don't think we're going to abandon any roads. I remember in the 90s when we were going to abandon the roads, and that a lot of them were in the first district. We were going to no longer maintain them. And the proverbial manure spreader hit the fan, and it's not going to work. They're not. It's a comprehension we're not going to get through. So as we move forward into this new brave world, we're still going to have to fix our roads. So I hate to say it, but I think the option of a sales tax is what we're going to have to look at. And I think if we sit here with the five of us up here, I mean, some of us are going to be gone sooner than others. But I think you make a commitment with 5 people on board that this money will be spent on roads. It's going to be hard, even if we just do a general sales tax. That's going to be pretty hard to override. I don't think when we originally did this, we put our feet and, you know, put our stake down deep enough so people understood where it was supposed to be, because they interpret it so many different ways. I think we need to be more definitive.
Thank you. And I've got Supervisor Arroyo, Wilson, and Bushnell in the queue.
Well, thank you for pointing out that this funding request is to do public opinion research on a wide variety of pressing needs, where we really just need the chance to get more public input. And I wanted to ask a question. So, you know, I realize that the county's roads and the city's roads are apples and oranges in many ways, but when I was on the Eureka City Council, we talked about maintaining and a focus on maintaining arterials, essentially, as you know, roads with higher volumes, essentially, because they're just they're the most used and critical to. You know, it's hard to choose which roads are most important, right? But those with really high volumes were seen as very important. But what I think I observe with us is that a lot of times we have catastrophic failures of roads, and so a lot of funding has to be diverted to those versus maintaining those arterials or collectors that are used by more traffic volumes. I'm sure we aim to do it all, but can you speak to kind of the prioritization of the funding, and is what I'm saying accurate from your perspective?
So yes, we do prioritize by arterial, and above that by traffic loading. So Central Ave, Redwood Drive, and Garberville, those kind of roads get our most attention. We do have a lot of backcountry roads, and the roads were built where the roads were built at the time. They were stagecoach roads, most of them. There was no rules, regulations. The roads could go wherever, and every year you just pushed it open again. Well, you can't do that anymore. And we do have a lot of failures in our severe winters. And, you know, looking forward to future, you know, fire issues with plastic pipes melting, et cetera. So we will always I don't see getting out of the disaster mode without, billions of dollars of investment, and that's not going to happen. But we do the best we can to keep everything together, and then we have to rely on the state and feds to come up with, the majority of the funding. That's why they have those programs, because we're not the only county that gets disasters. But again, each and every one of those cost the county money. So if you look on average of 10 to 20% cost match by the county, and I'm putting out $30 million in projects this summer, that's $6 million that's not going to regular road maintenance. That's $6 million that's going to leverage the $30 million for those specific locations. It would be wonderful if the feds and the state paid 100%, but they don't do that. And well, rural California does not fare well because the gas tax formula is really based on population. As I said, there is a small component for road miles, but we have all those road miles because we provide all of the goods to build those cities. The aggregate, the timber, the food, the dairy. That doesn't come from Safeway or Home Depot. It comes from rural California.
Sure. If I may, I did have a couple other funding stream related questions to just get them all out at once. So I wondered what your understanding of our, potential for infrastructure dollars from the federal infrastructure funding stream is. I know that we've kind of seen that be slow to materialize by and large, but what do you see there?
We compete as often as we can with for the federal funds. We regularly get Highway Safety Improvement Program funds. Some of the bigger programs, we've got some groundwork that we need to do first. But again, it all rolls back to the county's biggest need is basic road maintenance. It's not big new projects. And all the federal funds going up to the current federal bill, they are all talking fix it first. There is no program at the federal level that gives money to counties and cities to maintain roads. They're all for capital projects, so all the talk about fix it first never got into the actual bill language.
And lastly, did the self-help opportunity for, essentially taxing one's own entity and getting a higher rate of matching from state grants, did that go away?
No, thank you for bringing that up. That was on my list, but I never looked at my notes to talk about what I was supposed to. So that is still out there. The only rural county in California that qualifies that is Madera County. They get about $325,000 a year, so it's not a lot, and that is divided between the county and the cities. And so they have two cities, so you're taking $325,000 and dividing it by 3. But they also that program is $200 million a year statewide. And so there's a big component of that program that is competitive, and Madera did get a $5 million project out of that competitive program, so that you get your baseline amount, which is better than nothing, but it's nowhere near what we would get by our own local. If we were going to a quarter cent to a half cent, that's $6 million a year, and so the county would not come close to getting that kind of money out of that component, but we would get that 300 some odd thousand that would probably go through HCOG for allocation, rotated around. There's different ways you can do it, but that allocation is actually very minimal, and that's the kind of money we need, is that direct money that's flexible that we can use for maintenance, not dedicated to a single project.
So we would get essentially a per capita or some defined contribution by taxing ourselves, plus we would be more competitive for grant funding.
We'd be more competitive for that 200 million, or about 100 million of it is the competitive, and that's limited only to the self-help counties. So again, we would be limiting competition, which is always good when you have those kind of funds. But again, we would be competing against all the urban areas that have taxes.
Thank you.
And I've got Supervisor Wilson and then Supervisor Bushnell.
Thanks. I've got a couple things here. I think what Supervisor Arroyo mentioned with relationship to being apples and oranges, with relationship to roads between the county and the cities, is basically miles per capita. I mean, we just have many more miles per capita, per person, per parcel than within the city jurisdictions. And so that speaks to one of our inabilities with relationship to being able to, it just costs more per driver, per person, and the cities have been taxing themselves more, a lot, or some more, some of them have, to address that, and we haven't necessarily been able to get that over the hump for us. And I will say that that also they're also less car reliant in a lot of places. So when Supervisor Madrone speaks of the costs of having a vehicle, it speaks to why we want to seek and create living in community spaces where maybe cars aren't necessarily required, because we're basically, if we build more community where cars are required in order to function, or they're not attached to public transit or alternative means to move around, well then these are expenses that then are required, they're just that people have to take on. And so how we plan our communities has impact with relationship to these decisions, and how we have planned our communities in the past has impact. And we're having to pay for that collapse of infrastructure, and frankly that technology is not self-sustaining as much as we maybe have thought it would have been or could be. And so we have to be conscious of that. And then even speaking to, I think you're right, like we also, on the other side of the coin, with relationship to rural transportation, the goods and services provided within those spaces is important, but not everybody is providing goods and services necessarily to that space. So I think it's important as we move forward to always be thinking about this in our planning. And I know we've received some emails from folks who are concerned about roads discussions without attaching to that discussions around public transit and around alternative modes of transportation other than cars. And so I think whatever we do moving forward, I will definitely want to make sure that if we're going to move forward with any kind of polling or those kinds of things, that we're talking about all that, because we're essentially talking about taxing people in urban and suburban places in order to support less efficient road infrastructure, as it moves farther out. And so we have to make the case, if they're going to be taxed, like, is it fair? What's the equitable part about that? If you're, say a renter without a vehicle and you're being asked to be taxed on that, we're going to have to make the case as to why that works. And so I think it's important as we move in that discussion. I do think that we do have a good track record with Measure Z in terms of the accountability. I mean, I know we're in a place with Measure Z right now where a lot of that money's been, consumed within, certain elements of of public safety and other things. But ultimately, the decision-making process that we've had annually has been very open and transparent, and we just don't see that anywhere else in the state. And I think if we were to move forward with any kind of taxation related to this, if it's in that same model, I would expect we would probably have something similar to that, or maybe attach it to this, or something to that effect. And then parcel tax. I mean, I do know that some cities do have parcel taxes associated with transportation. It does exist, maybe not here. I can't think of it right now, but I do know that that does exist, and I don't want completely off the ideas that are out there. And in many ways, we could be looking at a mix of options. We don't have to just pick one and then that's it. We really need to look at all of the options. And so I think that is, I wouldn't want to remove that from the table for sure. Especially when we're talking about who's served, and again, it's an equity issue. The reduction of road mileage, I mean, because we had maybe some political fervor related to that in the 90s, does not mean I think it should be off the table now, because maybe there wasn't the political will, as it were. I think if we're asking all of the county to be taxed and charge them for this, then, I think there should be some accounting with relationship to not just, are all the miles of road out there really effective and effectual? We should be asking ourselves, if that road wasn't there, would we build it? And think about that in terms of the long-term maintenance of that. And then also looking at technologies to reduce asphalt in general. And there are, and Tom, you and I have discussed, there are other places around the world and in this country where there are mechanisms by which, especially in roads that don't have a lot of traffic, where you're reducing the width of the road pretty significantly to one lane with passing and those sorts of things. And that's just one of the ways that a lot of places deal with this situation, because we're just at a crisis point where we just can't, having certain levels of service may become a luxury at some point as opposed to a necessity. And we're just going to have to really reevaluate that. So those are my thoughts on this. I mean, what we're really, I think, being asked today is two things. One is to create an ad hoc to sort of deal with the first question, which is, do we want to invest $330,000 to review this option as well as some other things as well. So those are my thoughts on this. I appreciate this issue. It's really important. We have to figure out what to do. There's a lot of discussion around that. But I just going back to my main point is, I do think that we are at a place where if this is just about cars and then we're gonna lose at least some of my constituency for sure on that issue. Like, I mean, with relationship to, we need to think about alternatives and with relationship to transportation. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. And I've got Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. This is just more of a question for concerning the report, and I just don't know the answer. So we have a lot of road work that needs to be done from storm damage, and it tends to take 2-3 years to get that kind of done. And I'm wondering if that's reflective of the declining numbers for the roads report in Humboldt, or if it doesn't, if it's just the pavement surface.
No, this is solely focused on the pavement surface. The storm damage is a completely different ball of games. We don't include that money in our maintenance, what we're looking at for maintenance. When I say, we have basically 10 million we apply for maintenance. We're probably going to put in 30 million in capital projects this year for those storm damage sites, which is completely separate, has nothing to do with the overall pavement maintenance except for the pavement in that very, very small segment of the road.
Okay, so it's just road surface. And along those thoughts, if do you have an idea, and if you don't know, fine, just say you don't know, but like if we were to do a countywide investigation of the amounts of roads that you would probably go away from. I mean, in my district, and I just want to use an example because we'll see, people will, this isn't gold, but like Island Mountain Road and Ill Rock, or it would be Fort Seward Road. Those are roads that I don't know if the maintenance, and there's no road surface there, they don't have pavement, but it still takes away from the department. And do we, I know we grade it and we put some rock on it and we do some culvert work, but how much do you think that those types of roads in districts around Humboldt County take away from the department, or would it be helpful to not maintain those types of roads?
It would always be helpful not to have to maintain things as long as I keep my existing budget. The issue is there are people that live out there and they've counted on that road their entire lives. And yes, it costs money, but it's a lot cheaper to maintain a gravel road than it is a paved road. We did an experiment in the Ferndale Bottoms where we converted some roads to gravel. We used some enzymes to try to keep the dust down. It was not very popular in the long run, because if you want to, if controlling dust is very, very expensive in the long run. You might as well chip seal the road than try to control the dust every year. And so a lot of our roads are chip seal roads. But where there are people, you really don't want that dust issue. That becomes a health issue. There's all kinds of other things that rotate around that. There's sediment, all kinds of environmental issues. But we do have the gravel roads, and they are cheaper to maintain. I'll tell you that straight up, right now, that, Supervisor Bohn had brought up in the hall before this item about, Sonoma County looking to convert a huge amount of roads to gravel. And that's the whole issue, is the cost. It's if it's a lot cheaper to, I can maintain the whole system cheaper if I was converted all to gravel, but I wouldn't have a job.
Well, okay, but along those thoughts, there are areas appropriate in Humboldt County that are not utilized a lot. And I can tell you that the Fort Seward Road is in way better shape than general portions of the Alder Point Road.
Yep.
And tentatively it throughout the year stays in better shape. And so is that also something that possibly the ad hoc could talk about, is maybe if we don't abandon those roads, maybe if we convert those roads to a cheaper gravel-based road?
I'm open to everything. That's the reason I put as many things in there as I could to list, and including the eliminating roads. But yes, converting roads if it's possible, if we can do that. We're more than willing to do that, because it's a lot, again, it's easier and cheaper to maintain a gravel road. And they usually stay in better shape because they have less traffic.
Right. And so, and it would still be, maintained. Most of them are very lowly used, not used a lot. And, okay, thank you.
Thank you, and I'll jump in real quick, and then I've got Supervisor Wilson in the queue. One of the other things that happens from bad roads is it reduces tourism. I mean, it doesn't take much of driving some of our rural roads to go, I don't know if I want to go back there, beat up my car. I'll give you one really prime example, and that's Scenic Drive in Trinidad. I would suggest that Scenic Drive is probably in worse shape than any road in the county. And that's saying something, because there's a lot of really bad roads out there, and not due to lack of attention by staff. I mean, staff do an amazing amount. I mean, I've been watching Daryl on the crew up north. He's performing the duties of the laborers because we're down-staffed and we don't have all the people at times. But we got a lot of work to go there. And, I think something like Scenic Drive, we're going to have to get some infrastructure help from the federal government to ever bring that into kind of shape, because we're looking at 30, 40 million just for Scenic Drive with engineered walls and all kinds of things. But it is truly one of the most important economic engines for that community, along with the trails and the beaches and things like that. Do you know how many miles of road there are by district? Do you have that information?
I have that information. Roughly, each district has between 2 and 250, other than Hoopa, which has 105, I think.
All by itself.
So I have 6 different road districts, and most of them are pretty balanced between 2 and 250, and then Hoopa's the anomaly, but it's far out and the roads are spread out.
Right, and then Hoopa gets added to the rest of the 5th, and being such a large district, I would think.
That's part of your 2 to 250 range.
Yeah, okay. And I hope that when we put this on the ballot, we'll call it Measure R. I mean, that would make some sense, right? Measure R for roads. I also have gotten a lot of input on transit as well, in that people do want to see funds for transit. Right now, we're just having a hard time getting people to want to even ride the buses and stuff, right? So that's a ridership issue as well, and being so spread out, it gets complicated. But I definitely would support that, and I'm looking forward to this consultant's work in doing the surveys, making the calls, talking with the community, and seeing what people support, what will really work here, because it does seem like transit, and then trails also. I mean, we're building more and more trails, but that's also stretching the Public Works budget in terms of the Parks Division in particular. Thank goodness for Humboldt Trails Council and all the incredible work they do with the trail stewards. But, it'd be interesting to see what kind of support the community might offer to a ballot measure that might have 85 or 90% for roads, 5% for transit, 5% for trails. I don't know. I'm just curious. That would be nice information to try and garnish. in this effort. So look forward to that. And I'll just say I would very much like to be on the ad hoc, but we'll finish our discussion here at the board, and then we'll go to the public and get public comment. We do have 2 hands up in Zoom. Supervisor Arroyo, then Bushnell.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I had Supervisor Wilson in the queue already. Excuse me. I've been messing that
Go
up today.
ahead.
So Supervisor Wilson, then Arroyo, then Bushnell.
I just wanted to, I just want to make sure, or not make, I just want to put out there that if the ad hoc committee, which it seems like we're moving towards doing, with relationship to the idea around the reduced mileage option, I don't know if I'd think it's the best use of the ad hoc committee to like get into the details of that, other than to sort of like review potential parameters for a study and then kind of go from there. That's all. I wouldn't, my expectation wouldn't be like come back with the, what roads we should do. I think that it should be more of a sort of a technical review. That's all. I think this conversation is really healthy and good, and I'm happy that I'm grateful to Supervisor Madrone and others who have sort of, kind of getting us to this place, so, as well as staff. Thanks.
Supervisor Arroyo.
Well, I'm also interested in hearing what the ad hoc comes back with regard to conversion to gravel roads or consideration of road miles and how we handle those in general. I realize it is a tough decision, but it's interesting to hear that history that the county took on so many road miles many decades ago when conditions were different, and that I think that bears revisiting. And I'm also really interested to hear and happy to hear that there's so much interest in transit. We got a lot of communication from members of the public about transit with respect to this, and I agree that transit's really important, and I'm thrilled to be the chair of the Humboldt Transit Authority and encourage folks who are interested in talking more about transit to reach out in other ways too. I know it's hard to, there seems to have been a call to action around this, and that is wonderful to see. And I know it's hard to go to yet another meeting, but HTA would also, we're a joint powers authority. We'd also love to hear from community members. Every year there's the unmet transit needs process, which includes many public meetings and opportunities to give input about what transit needs need to be met. In some of the communications we received, I saw specific requests around times and dates for service, and we're well aware that folks would like to see earlier and later weekday service as well as expanded weekend service, and some of that has to do with staffing and drivers. So we're continuing to strive to get to capacity with drivers, also continuing to really look at opportunities for funding. So folks may have heard, but we got additional funding to develop our own hydrogen fuel cell motor coach to something new and innovative. We'd be building something a little different from what's out there in the market to specifically to address some of our great distances with transit, and then additionally looking at and expanding microtransit and working with tribes on that. So many times traditional forms of transit don't work for rural communities, or don't work for our community for whatever reason. It's very expensive, heavily subsidized. Even at its best, transit is like 90% subsidized. So we have to be really cautious about putting on additional service and expanding service because it's quite costly, and we have to meet these kind of mandates for fare box revenue, or the amount that people are paying to ride transit. So all of that is to say that I'm really interested in continuing to talk to people about transit, and I encourage folks to ride the transit system we currently have if that's feasible for them. We're still struggling to get back up to pre-COVID ridership levels, and I know that it's not everything for everyone, but it would be great to see more folks who are expressing interest in transit really riding regularly. So I implore folks to ride transit, and we'll be looking at more ways to incentivize that in the near future.
Thank you. Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. I just wanted clarification. You said you had 6 districts in Humboldt. Is that because the HOOPA
There's 6 road districts.
Right.
They do not align with supervisor districts.
Right.
And it's based on geography.
Right.
In fact, some of you have multiple road districts within your supervisory district and are dealing with multiple road foremen in different parts of your
Right, I have
district.
2, or 3. And the total amount of roads in Humboldt County, public roads?
County maintained 1,207 and about 160 bridges.
Okay.
160 bridges.
Yeah, culverts.
Thousands.
Yeah, the
Trivia.
culverts are probably one of the big issues, right?
Yeah, one of the bigger issues is in 1964, they were all replaced at the same time. And so not being able to replace them all at the
Right.
same time, you know, we've got a heavy culvert program that we've been working on for over many, many years now to try to get them replaced. But, you know, there are more out there failing than we can get to replace on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you for that.
Supervisor Bohn.
Yeah, and I do appreciate all the mass letters, form letters that we got the last day and a half that somebody asked somebody to send us. But this is also with what I remember. I used to be on Transit Authority. I think they got a $27 million grant. I think 17 for the hydrogen. We went down to Sacramento and looked at the hydrogen facility. In fact, actually, I said we should put a card lock hydrogen facility so UPS and a few other people could take advantage of it if that's the route we're going to take. As Supervisor Arroyo said, it's highly subsidized and a lot of state money comes in. I'm going to be real selfish here right now and says I'd love to help the Transit Authority, but they're getting so much money from the state and that's such a lead item to help with public transit. Let's let the state keep giving us money and try to fix our roads, because I think Supervisor Madrone touched on it, was tourism, which is a big part, because we're not, you know, the tour of the unknown coast may not come over Petrolia. They're not going to run the marathon through Bull Creek this year. They're not going to use that road because of the gravel. Gravel roads at a lot of locations, especially if you're using them on an arterial that goes over 35 miles an hour, are unsafe. If you're going into turns and things like that, they end up being, because it's real hard to stripe a gravel road. It's it adds a lot of liability to us as a maintained road. But I think we should realize that we didn't just build these roads so everybody could go out and live in the country and be away from everybody. That's where Humboldt County was built, through timber and the resources that we got back in those days. And people keep wanting to say timber's dead, fishing's dead, and everything else. They're not dead. They may not be as affluent as they were, but we still have to realize what makes this go around. So I understand that we need to all live in a clump, but we're not all going to live in a clump, because I think it was said it's kind of like transit. That's not for everybody. And we see that throughout the United States, and I know we try to keep pushing that. And I admire the tenacity that we keep pushing at it. But I can tell you, I've got quite a few people in my district that don't probably tend to agree with that. So we have roads that we are having to maintain. However, we maintain them, and we have to do it. That's part of our job to do up here. I'm not as much into telling people where, how, and what they're going to do when they live as I am maintaining what we have had and what we've built. I do know things are changing, and I know we tend to forget how we get here and then chase a golden ring that's in front of us. But don't forget how we got here, and realize the things that got us here are probably going to keep us here.
All right, well, we've had a robust discussion up here. I think I'll go to public comment at this point. And we do have 2 hands up in Zoom. The first one is 5603, *6 to unmute, and you've got 3 minutes. There you go. Welcome.
Hello, this is Colin Fisk, Executive Director of CRTP, the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. I think the goal of the county's transportation system needs to be to ensure safe, healthy, sustainable, and economically empowering access and mobility for both residents and visitors. Roads are obviously part of that, but they are not the only part. And I think that limiting this specific funding discussion to only roads and leaving out public transit would be really a disservice to the community. You may have seen recently that CRTP, EPIC, North Coast Environmental Center, Rocker, and 350 Humboldt have stated publicly that we won't be supporting a transportation sales tax ballot measure unless it does include dedicated funding for public transit. There's several reasons for that. Funding local transit system is a critical climate solution. It provides lots of other economic and social benefits. I think it's also critical that, as some of you hinted at, from an equity perspective, a sales tax is regressive, which means that lower income people pay a larger proportion of their income in tax. And even in a rural area, lower income folks are less likely to own a vehicle and therefore less likely to benefit from this, and more likely to be reliant on public transit. So dedicating some of that funding to transit, if there's a sales tax on the ballot, will be critical from an equity perspective. Obviously, there is a huge and growing road maintenance deficit. I do think it's important to acknowledge that, given the estimates of that deficit, even if the full revenue of a half-cent sales tax were devoted to that purpose, it would cover maybe about a fifth of the deficit, and I suspect that road condition would continue to decline. In contrast, that devoting some of that funding to transit could allow significant and meaningful service improvements and would reduce the maintenance burden on roads by removing some cars. It's also true that the Transit Authority has been successful recently at receiving some large state grants, which is wonderful. Those grants do fund mostly capital expenses, while the system improvements that will have the biggest impact on ridership are related to operations. Pretty much all state and federal money that goes to transit has a lot of limits and restrictions on it, and local, dedicated, flexible funds are really needed to ensure a high-quality transit system for the future. Thanks. So again, we would strongly urge you to broaden your funding investigations and your polling to include public transportation as a core element, and also repeat our request that the county consider other potential funding sources like vehicle registration fees and parking meters in downtown areas. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have 7718, *6 to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. So maybe my math's off, please correct me if I'm wrong, but apparently the county needs $57.16 million more per year to improve the road. To keep it the same, it needs $34.38 million per year to keep the roads. I think the prior speaker was speaking to that a little bit. I do concur with Mike Wilson. If you have somebody who's a renter who doesn't have a car, lives in the city, it's going to be really hard to sell to them that the things they buy travel on county roads unless they buy things from the farmer's market, which is what, maybe 1% of the produce, maybe probably not even that. But the trucks that come in from Walmart, Costco, any other large chain are on the state highways. I think the biggest flaw we have here is a lack of gumption to counties to get together and go to the state and get their fair share. That was brought up earlier. There's way too much money being spent in the state venue, not for the county. We can agree on that, I believe. How do you accomplish this? Well, basically, technology, it's not that far off, probably already there, easy to do. It's miles traveled on certain roads. And it's just basically the equivalent of a technological toll road. Whatever miles you spend driving on a certain road, that is what your tax is. And I think that can be done out monthly or whatever. But until you get that, then you're not going to have equity with the state. And if you don't have the cojones to go to bat through CPAC and all these other organizations to force the state to do the right thing, our roads will continue to deteriorate. I did have a question on this polling process. It looks like are you spending a total of $336,250, or are you adding $336,250 to an amount that's already the same? So just curious how much total is going to be spent. And I highly recommend that you consider repurposing some Measure Z money, maybe 0.25% of that if you went to the roads strictly, repeal and replace. 2/3, I think that. I personally don't object to another 1/4 cent tax And some years ago, they tried to pass a half-cent sales tax, and that went down. I feel the people got
30 seconds.
Madrone had and I think they're not happy with the county. Good luck with trying to get them to go ahead and give you a full half-cent sales tax on their dime. Thanks for my opportunity.
Thank you, commenter. And bring it back to the board at this point. And just a quick clarification from our CAO. The $336,000, 250 that's being considered here is for 4 different items to be researched. Could you let us know once again what those 4 items are?
Yes, Supervisor Madrone, that is the road tax, the Department of Finance, Measure S, and potentially an AVA, abandoned vehicle increase. There's some proposed legislation in the works right now that would allow us that flexibility.
So it would cover research on all 4 of those items.
Correct, yes. And it is in an amount not to exceed. So I would expect that, we will take every effort possible to reduce that amount as where applicable and possible.
Okay, appreciate that. And I've got Supervisor Wilson and then quick clarification from Supervisor Bushnell. Supervisor Wilson.
Yeah, the commenter brought up the concept of registration fee. Does the county have the ability to have a registration fee add-on to the state's registry? Is that a thing? Do we do that already?
A vehicle registration fee? Tom, are you educated on that?
Not necessarily. He brought that up before, and I haven't had a chance to look into it, but I believe there's a $5 or $10 fee that the county could possibly charge based on the reference he provided.
Okay. So, I mean, that'd be one way to parse out, and I think is a reasonable, I don't know how much money that would be necessarily, but I wouldn't take that off the table. From my perspective, I mean, it's basically putting it on vehicle owners specifically, and I think that that's not unreasonable, and I don't know where that would happen in this, but I also still don't think a parcel tax is off the the table from my perspective. I know it's unpopular, I mean, from certain elements of of where it would be of folks, but it is out there. We do it for schools, we do it for other things. I don't know why we wouldn't consider it in this regard. I mean, I'm a property owner, I get taxed for these things, I get it. And especially when we're talking about what is sort of a frankly a land-based issue, which is providing road service into rural spaces. I mean, that is definitely, because ultimately, although we talked about public transit being subsidized, we're talking about a subsidy. I mean, that is what we're speaking to right now, which is we have a wide portion of our community that's unable to support through the taxation, the current construct, roads across our community, and we as an entire county have to ask ourselves, is it of value to everybody to tax our more densely populated areas to help subsidize the spaces that are having trouble, which is the county, to do that. So this is, in one way or another, there is subsidy occurring in this space, and so that's why I feel like the public transport part of this, I think, is still really important. And I think that's about it for me. I'm supportive of moving forward with this, with relationship to the polling, so long as it's informed by this discussion. And I don't feel like I necessarily have to be on a committee necessarily, but I trust that the staff and whoever is going to be on this committee can hash these things out. So there you go.
Thank you. And Supervisor Bushnell? I'll come back. I'll come back to you. Supervisor Bohn, you had a final comment?
Chairman Madrone, can we take a 5-minute break?
Let's take a
possibly?
5-minute break, yes. We'll wrap up this item when we come back. All right, we are back, and we are on our final item of the day, and we've had a very robust discussion up here as a board, so I think what we're looking for is a motion and a second to move forward.
I'd like to make a motion, do staff's recommendation, and include public transit with that. And do staff's recommendation.
And in that motion, ad hoc members?
I'll second the motion. We can talk about
Ad hoc will be Madrone and Bushnell.
Looks like we have a good agreement up here, and we have a second for that motion from Supervisor Wilson.
Yeah,
Motion-
and I just want to make sure that ad hoc is not limited to just public transit in that conversation.
We'll delve into all of the things that were discussed here today. That's
Perfect.
why it was
Good
so
enough.
great. Director Mattson said, please give me feedback and direction, and I think we've done a superb job of covering all the bases on that. So with that, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. No worries.
Thank you for your patience.
Did you want to say something?
Well,
Go ahead.
I just want to clarify who's going to be organizing the ad hoc. Is that going to be the Public Works Department?
Along with CAO.
Yes, we will organize the ad hoc because you'll be working directly with our department.
Correct. Okay, so just wanted that. And so you'll, okay, perfect. Thank you.
Good clarification. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, Supervisor Bohn?
Yep.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Arroyo?
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Yes.
And Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody, and we are adjourned.